We want you to just be as honest and open as you can, and let us know what your opinions are on these subjects. And I certainly appreciate so much your willingness to do this for us. So, Rex, are you ready?
I'm ready. So
okay.
First of all, I want to thank everybody, just as Terry did, for spending their time with us this evening, to help answer some of the questions that some of the AAPI junior tennis players and their parents around the state of Texas might have. And so for tonight's panel, we've brought together a diverse group of speakers. We've got Justin Quest, who is a longtime high school coach. We've got Sujay Lama, who's a longtime college coach and a parent of a current college player. We've got Pranav Kumar, who was one of the top juniors in the state once upon a time, played college tennis at two different schools in the state of Texas, and is now a fledgling professional tennis player. So, and then we'll finish up with Tori Ramakrishnan. Hopefully I said that last name correct, Tori. Ah, yes, the knowing nod. Right, but yeah, Tori's actually from out of state, but she is currently attending SMU. She was our tennis on campus team captain a couple years ago. So she actually had a different path to playing tennis as a college age player. And so it'll be interesting to hear her perspective as far as everyone else's. And so what I was thinking for the format tonight, everybody, we'll spend a little bit of time with each of the panelists, ask them a couple questions individually, let them tell their story. And then from there, we'll conclude tonight with some questions for all four of you. So, when we get to that part, we'll just everybody kind of hop in with their input from their respective areas of experience and expertise. So tonight, I thought we'd start with Coach Justin Quest. As I mentioned, he is a high school tennis coach in Texas. Actually, his team, Allen High School, just made it into the Final Four. So, one of the top four high school teams in the state this year. But Coach Quest, again, welcome. And I know, from past conversations with you, you have well over 50% AAPI representation on your respective teams, from varsity, JV, freshman, maybe even the middle school programs that maybe you're not directly a part of. But in any case, just wondering what your unique experiences are with AAPI juniors and their parents and so forth. I know you have a parents meeting every year, right? What are some of the things you discuss in that parents meeting?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it, and I've always enjoyed our conversations, kind of regarding all this stuff, Rex. But definitely, I mean, pretty much as typical with most big high schools, we are the largest high school in the state by over 2,000 kids. So, but we generally have a parent meeting up front, and that's generally 60, 70 families, and where I, as the coach, go over expectations and how important academics is, and what tennis can lead to, and what being on a team can be, and and how to kind of navigate through time management at a school our size. It's always tricky when they're playing at varsity or even a junior varsity sport, how to kind of tackle the hurdles of the rigorous schedule of academics in a big school versus extracurricular activities. So I think parents in that community are real concerned with how they're able to manage both very, very well. And so typically I'll try to kind of help in that, in which, time management, as we know, just being a young adult and going into adulthood is so important to learn at an early age. And so I really try to approach from that and say, if they can master being able to put the phone down, so to speak, for a time or two, and be able to organize their day, it's huge. And so I think just having them do an extracurricular activity, and I'll go into some stories kind of later about some specific kids that come to mind, is just a real learning life tool. So.
That's great. Yeah, obviously, feel free to share some of those stories now. Either from the young student athletes' perspective or some of the parents' perspectives and your experiences.
Yeah, well, I think, and this is certainly a case, and a question I get asked a lot is, especially, we get some bright kiddos in our program, and I've had kids go to Carnegie Mellon, Brown, Yale, and I know it's always a question that I get. Listen, sometimes they feel like maybe being in an extracurricular activity, they don't get a weighted grade for being in an extracurricular activity. In other words, they can improve their GPA by not taking tennis because maybe they can take a class that's on a 5.0 scale versus tennis, which is a period in the day, and only a 4-point scale. So honestly, I think that can be corrected. I don't know where if the TEA, Texas Education Agency, is willing to kind of maneuver that. In my experience, they haven't. But that is sometimes a drawback, quite honestly, with some members of the AAPI, because they want to make sure that their GPA is high, and sometimes they feel like being in an extracurricular activity is in fact negating their GPA because it's not a weighted class and it is a part of their schedule. So that's a tricky, slippery slope, which I've had to navigate with some parents, and letting them know, listen, playing a lifetime sport and being on a team is going to make this individual a well-rounded individual, and actually will help in terms of a college resume. And it has. I had a young man go to Caltech just this past year, and of the AAPI community, and his parents were really positive about their experience, and quite frankly helped them. It helped him get accepted into Caltech. I had another young girl that was she's Dr. Stephanie Ho now, but she was top 10 in her class, not top 10%. But top 10, and in a graduating class of probably roughly 1,300 kids. And so you got to look at that. She was number 3 in Allen of 1,300 kids, and managed a full varsity schedule, along with, I'm sure, taking AP class for the rest of her schedule. So I try to tell parents, and even kids who might be a little bit, listen, I don't know, GPA versus tennis, that it's possible. It takes a massive amount of commitment and time management, but it can be done. And so I think it's the conversations that I've had, even after parent meetings, reassuring it's those, and how they can do both, and both are possible. But it takes a unique individual and somebody that's committed to both things.
Great. So it sounds like time management and then creating a well-rounded individual are kind of the common themes that you try to sell, if you will, to the parents and the student athletes. Are there any other things, selling points, if you will, that you discuss during these parent meetings, or maybe throughout the course of a student athlete's career at Allen?
Well, yeah, and I think too, and I think it's trying to get them to understand that as you said, just being a well-rounded individual, but also enjoying the camaraderie and the social aspect of our sport. I know, and I apologize for my kids in advance if you can hear that, but I know, I think of 2 other individual sisters that decided to quit tennis. They were sisters a year apart, so maybe sophomore and junior year. Great girls, showed promise. But came to me, their families came to me and said, Coach, we're gonna go ahead and quit, and we want to really focus on academics. And fast forward to their junior and senior year, I saw them in the hallway, said, hi, how you doing? And they stopped me and they said, listen, Coach, we really regret, our decision in not playing. And actually, the funny story is one ended up being valedictorian and the other was salutatorian in their respective class. So they achieved their goal academically, but in hindsight, and I think I caught them their last semester where the GPAs had already been averaged and the salutatorian and that valedictorian had already been decided. So they had time to reflect. And that was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I won't forget the conversation because they very clearly said, Coach, we really feel like we missed out on being on a team and the social aspect of just being around other people and being outside and getting vitamin D and not going straight home to the books. So that was a really, really eye-opening moment for me. And like I said, having other kids that have done very, very well academically and gone into great, great institutions and managed to play a 6A varsity schedule. So backtrack to those two young girls. They had, well, quite honestly, gained a little bit of weight. Their faces looked drawn in a little bit, and you could tell they had poured their whole heart and soul into obtaining that GPA number. And listen, that's a fantastic thing, and they've gone on to do great things. But I did hear remorse in their voice when they felt like they missed out on the high school experience, I guess. So.
Oh, that's a great story, Justin. Thanks for sharing. So just to follow up on that story, actually, do you think them quitting high school tennis, was that parent driven, or do you think that was something that they had decided on their own or a joint effort?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've had it both ways. Quite honestly, I've had parent conversations to what I spoke about before about tennis not being ungraded on a weighted scale. And that's been a deciding factor for some parents, quite honestly. But those two girls in particular, I'm sure it was somewhat parent driven. I don't see how it couldn't be, but I think they were chasing that elusive carrot of the valedictorian and the salutatorian. And listen, they achieved it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's an admirable goal. But having achieved that, like I said, there was remorse that I got the sense they felt like they could have done that and had a quote life as well. So I think about another young boy. A lot of times when I do parent meetings, I'll actually have former players Zoom in or record something to me so I can show parents, former players and their testimonies, if you will. And I had another young man just in this last parent meeting who's now in his third year, I think, at the University of Texas, and continued to play all 4 years, but kind of shut it down his junior year in terms of developing and getting better, because in our high school, and I guess most high schools, their junior year is the toughest year academically, and that's the year that really decides, your top 10%, top 15%, and he did make it into Texas, and I know academically it's harder and harder to get into these big institutions from what I hear. But he, in his testimony, said, "Listen, I felt like I had to put all my eggs in one bucket, and really start developing as a player. And what I realized is when I got to college and was playing intramurals and chose obviously not to play, but when I got to see other kids that I'd recognized that were great high school players at opponent schools or competitive schools, I got to know them, and I realized they ended up at the same place that I did, but yet they were much higher ranked and maintained a steady USTA schedule, tournament schedule, etc. So it was kind of interesting to hear that viewpoint, to hear that he ended up in the same dorm room, more or less, or dorm hall as these guys that were incredible USTA juniors, and yet he ended up in the same place and could have developed, at least to his own admittance, he could have developed a lot more, but decided to go more the academic route. So anyway, that's kind of some real life player testimonies that, it is possible. It is possible to do both, but it is concern. And it's kind of navigating that with parents and players and letting them know. And like I said, situations that I've said before that, it's possible. So.
Hey, one more question on a related note, Justin, before we move on to Sujay. But how often have AAPI parents come to you with whatever concerns they may have, versus the student athlete coming to you with whatever concerns they may have about playing?
Right. No, that's a great question. I actually just fielded a phone call a day ago about a young girl that was just kind of entertaining the aspect, and we were talking about academically and what it means to play high school tennis and the time commitment that involves. And so I would say probably once a month, twice a month, there's always a question to kind of answer and guide, if you will. But it comes up quite often, and I think sometimes they're not educated, quite frankly, on what can be done. And obviously, if I've got a young girl that's playing in the lineup for me that'll play at the state tournament. That's an AAPI individual, and she's incredible at the violin. She's first chair, I believe it's called, in state, and she just competed in I'm not sure the competition, but a very high level competition, and I worked with her on her getting to that event, and then she'll play in the state tournament in Waco in 3 days. And so I think it's educating the parents. Listen, I think it's great that they do that kind of stuff, and she's a National Merit Scholar. There you go. So I didn't mention that, but that's very few and far between to get that honor. And she's a varsity tennis player, and she'll play in the Final Four, as you said, Rex, in 3 days. And I talk to her parent quite often, and make sure she can get to the UIL events. So good question.
That was a fantastic way to, great story to end, our questioning for you, Justin. But as I think about it here, does anybody that's on the call right now, anybody on the speakers panel or on the USTA section staff have any questions for Justin, that come to mind before we move on to Sujay? Oh, great. Well, Justin, appreciate the input from a high school coach's perspective, and one that has a very heavy AAPI intensive roster. But let's move on to Sujay Lama, who is currently the head coach at Arkansas State University for the women's team. Some of you are around the USTA Texas section may remember him as the longtime coach of University of North Texas, the women's team. But I thought Sujay would have some great input, not only as a current college coach, but he actually also has a son that is playing Division I tennis right now. So, for our tennis parents out there in the audience, hopefully Sujay will have some perspectives on that as well. So, Coach, your day job, what do your recruiting pitches sound like whenever you are speaking to one of the AAPI demographic?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And Justin, I think this is a perfect segue, what you just talked about. First of all, I'm, Asian, and my wife is Asian. So I know, growing up, what that looked like, to try to pursue like tennis and also to pursue academics, right? Because there's a real push, from the cultural standpoint, just a demand that, that, hey, academics has to be number one, and that's going to be the focus, and everything's all about academic excellence. So that's how, at least growing up, that's how we were brought up. And I've also seen that with other Asian, kids, and also now in this country. I've lived here for 35 years. And so this is my 29th year of doing college coaching. So I've had to, think about this, or go through this a lot, and it's a myth, really. For me, the biggest myth is that, like, if you pursue tennis at a high level, whether it's in school or in college, that your academics is going to suffer. And 29 years I have been doing college coaching. I've never had a team that had a GPA under 3.2. My typical team GPA is like around 3.75. This semester, we are on track to have a team GPA of 4.0. Like, every grade so far has been A. So and I can give you stories about, kids like, and some of the best players I've had in 29 years at University of Florida, University of Illinois, University of North Texas, and here in Arkansas State. The best players are the best students. I'll give you a story. Mo McHugh from Portland, Oregon, who played for me at Illinois. She was a kid that came from China when she was 10 years old, and played for me at Illinois. She was triple major. And hear me out here when I'm talking about triple major: accounting, electrical engineering, and management. And she graduated with a 4.0 GPA. And later on, she went to Harvard. And just recently, I saw an article that she's like top 5, most influential business person in Chicago. So, what I want to be able to, tell parents, Asian American parents, is that, my goodness, why not college tennis? My goodness. Like, you play tennis through high school, juniors, you put in a lot of hours, and then the best time of your life with your tennis is college tennis. Like, there's nothing better than college tennis. I mean, to be part of a team, to grow as a team player, to experience traveling with teammates, to understand what sacrifice is, to understand what discipline looks like. We wake up 3 times a week. We are in the weight room at 6:15 a.m. I mean, there's so many lessons that can be learned playing college tennis, and I can assure you that the kids are going to be fine academically. Just like Justin said, these kids, if you play tennis at a fairly high level, I mean, you've got to be pretty smart. This is a cerebral sport. I mean, and if you played at a fairly high level, you've already learned how to manage time. And here's a interesting stat, Justin. In the fall, we play 5 tournaments. It's not as busy as in the spring. Spring, we are playing every weekend matches. Every weekend, we're playing matches. And consistently for 29 years, Rex, do you know that our GPA, our team GPA, is always a little bit higher in spring than in the fall when we are less busy? So for me, kids, when they are busy, when they know that they have a little less time, they are able to manage their time better. They're able to focus better. And at least from what I see from my culture is like, we talk about like, look, when you come to college tennis, maybe there's 1% of college tennis players that are going to become professionals. So for me, academics is very important. I mean, it's very, very important. So, I think that most college coaches, we have that because a lot of our contracts, like the academics is very important. The APR, so we have pressure for us to perform, as teams academically too, not just tennis wise. So, so that's the biggest thing I want to, encourage, parents and kids to understand that, look, college tennis, and there's so many different levels. You don't have to always go to Div 1. There's Div 2, there's Div 3. Div 3, by the way, has incredible academics. And you look at schools like Justin was talking, I think Carnegie Mellon. You talk about Swarthmore. I mean, you can go on and on. There are so many amazing schools, and there's a place for every kid. Every kid that plays high school tennis, there's a place for them, to play college tennis.
Wow, pretty inspiring words from Sujay there. You might be getting a couple phone calls from class of 26 and class of 27 girls here and around the state of Texas in the near future after that. So that was fantastic. But let's change gears, Sujay. Let's ask you to put your hat on as a tennis parent. So when you and Sid and your wife and the family were going through the recruiting process for your son, what were some of the things that you guys looked at as a family before Sid settled on his decision to go to Butler?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were looking at every possibility. I had a very open mind, and also told, Sid to be very open-minded, not to be like, okay, I've got to go Div 1 or, because I wanted him to explore also D3. There are some amazing schools. Like I just said, my daughter went to Colby up in the Northeast, had a great experience. And also as far as as with scholarships for men, there's only 4.5. So it's very, very difficult to get a full ride at a Division I level versus, with smaller schools, there's a lot of financial aid, need-based scholarships. So a lot of times you can actually get a lot more money at a D3 than a D1. So we were very, very open-minded as to which direction, he wanted to choose. But also for us, the two things that we really wanted him to really, really also be aware of is the coach and the environment of that team, and was he going to be actually able to grow as a person, not just as a tennis player. How is that culture out there? And of course the academics. And so, and as Sid was looking into different options, D1 and as well as D3, one thing that really what became really important for him was he really wanted to go and experience Division I. So that's how we started kind of narrowing down, and it came down to a couple of schools, 3-4 schools, and then ultimately when he went to visit Butler, he really loved the international business program there. Also, there are several kids from Texas that he had connected. He felt very comfortable. And then we as parents felt good about the coach and then the culture of the program itself. So that's how he kind of, went. And then, of course, we looked at, the amount of money he got from tennis scholarship as well as the academics, so that we were able to, help him go to Butler.
Just a follow-up question there. Sujay, did any of the coaches, when you guys were having discussions about Sid, did the AAPI topic come up at all, and how was that addressed, if so?
We really did not get that. I think maybe because a lot of the coaches that we were talking to, a lot of them knew my background, with college tennis and the advocate that I am for college tennis. And so for me, that really was never, a question.
No, fair enough. I thought that might be the case. Obviously everybody knowing that you've been in the industry for a long time. So I just didn't know if it did come up at all. But any follow-up questions for Sujay from the panel before we move on? Oh, Sujay, thanks for sharing your perspectives as both a college coach and a parent. And then now I'd like to kind of change gears and move over to Pranav. Pranav Kumar. He's played at 2 different schools here in Texas. He was once one of the top juniors in the state. A very highly coveted recruit once upon a time. And speaking of the education that Sujay brought up earlier, PK has not 1 but 2 degrees from these universities that he was able to play tennis for. And so Pranav, welcome. Any opening remarks from you about your experiences as not only a junior in the state of Texas and how that helped, transition you into, becoming a college, very successful college player, and now, an up and coming professional player?
Well, first of all, thanks. Thank you for having me, Rex, and everyone. And it's great to hear from the other panelists as well. My experience, obviously, I grew up in Texas. I played all the USTA Texas events since I was a kid. I played all the Zats and champs and super champs. And then went to both my schools. Also, I went to in Texas. I went to Texas A&M and SMU. So I'm really grateful for that experience. And yeah, I just learned a lot from playing. And I mean, what Sujay was saying was correct. Like, I'm playing pro tennis now, yes, but my best memories are definitely from playing college, and the most fun I had. Definitely very stressful too, obviously dealing with school as well, and being a student athlete, but definitely the best times were in high school and college, just being part of teams. And even in high school, I trained at an academy, so I was really close to a lot of my friends. So yeah, those are probably the things I remember the most.
Let's take you back to your junior days when you were training at the Lakes Tennis Academy in Frisco with my old buddy Nick and his staff over there. But what was the process for you and your family like when you were going through the recruiting process? What were the conversations more towards academics, or were you looking at the tennis, or what did that look like for you and your parents?
Yeah, so when I was going through that process originally, I wasn't that great of a junior. I was probably like in the top maybe 20 in Texas, so not really, I would say, good enough to be playing high level D1 tennis. Probably I was looking more at lower D1, and then a lot of D2 and D3 schools. So I was looking at at that time Drexel was an option for me, and then St. Edward's was an option for me in Austin, and then um, I did look at some other schools up north, and then I was looking at Trinity for D3 in San Antonio. So those were my three kind of big ones, and I emailed almost every coach in the country pretty much at one point, and A&M kind of gave me a chance kind of to redshirt and develop under that. And then I also knew that I did always want to go to a good school. That was kind of instilled in me as a kid. But my parents were I was very fortunate to have very open and parents that were willing to, let me make those decisions and kind of allow me to at least express what I wanted to do and then kind of make an overall decision. So when I was really deciding between St. Edward's, I was really probably going to go to St. Edward's for a while, and then A&M called and was like, "We have a spot for you. We can offer you." And then obviously I knew how good of an education, and the Aggie Network is it's very big. It's very known. The degree I got is very, very valuable. I value that. One of my best accomplishments, I'd say, is that degree, and obviously the SMU degree as well. So I took that and decided to go there. But yeah, my parents were very, very, they wanted what was best for me, and they knew how much I love to play tennis. I train 4 hours a day, on top of some fitness during high school, and usually a lot of early mornings, late nights. And they would drive me to all those places, and as long as my grades were good and I was doing the work that I needed, they were very happy to support my tennis aspirations.
So PK, that actually sounds like a similar path to what Sujay's son, Sid, was going through during the recruiting process. Huh? Obviously there were some D1 schools that were in the conversation, but then, D3 was part of the decision making process as well. And so yeah, we just want those parents and those aspiring juniors, out there right now to understand that there's no shame in looking at Division III schools or any other level. As both Justin and Sujay have spoken about. I mean, just being able to play this wonderful sport, at the next level while getting an education at the same time, I think is very valuable information for some of those parents and the juniors out there to have. It's not, just you can either pick academics or you can pick athletics, and you can't do both at the same time. Obviously, Justin has had many players do that over his almost 20-year career. Sujay's had it happen multiple times as well, and then we're hearing from a student athlete, fairly recent varsity student athlete right now at the collegiate level that's done it academically and athletically. So
yeah, they are right though. Like the best universities in terms of academics are typically Division III. I mean, like Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, Swarthmore. Like he named a few that like are the top universities in the U.S. And if you can also use tennis to help you get into those universities, I mean, why not? I think that's just something you have an advantage over, and you also provide value for the university. So like you can just like make the best case possible with using tennis for sure.
That's great. Let's transition into talk about what what you're doing right now. So we know PK graduated with a couple different degrees, so he's kind of trying his hand at professional tennis right now. How supportive have your parents been of this decision? And then while you're out there, I mean, do you still feel any AAPI related pressures as a touring pro right now, or
Yeah, I think my parents very, very supportive again. I think the fact that I have 2 degrees, like an undergrad and a master's, definitely helps me and my family, because at any moment I could stop and be probably just fine in my life. And I have 2 degrees, which I am passionate in. So I think I would be just fine in life. So I think this is more just to have that experience of, being out there and alone and just going through playing tennis and just doing as well as I can possibly, just see how high I could climb. And then my parents, growing up, they didn't have the same opportunities. So I feel like they were very, very persistent in telling me and my sister that, we can do whatever we want. We can go for whatever we want. We will support you, whether it's financially and not just financially, like actual support, through like phone calls and stuff like that. And whenever I'm home. So, those things have been super, super, super supportive. And then obviously my family, sometimes it's hard to explain to like my cousins or my uncles or whoever that, I'm playing tennis for a living. They don't quite understand it sometimes. They definitely think it's a hobby sometimes, which is a little frustrating, but they know that I work super hard and I'm very passionate about it. So uh, definitely it helps in certain ways, having people like that around me. But definitely my parents and my sister, they provided a lot of foundation for me to feel like I can go do this without feeling an insane amount of pressure. Obviously, there is some pressure, but not any added pressure than just playing matches and getting to places and those kinds of things.
That's great input there, Pranav. And I like to hear that. I mean, it sounds like everything ties into what both Justin and Sujay have presented so far. So I appreciate that. Any questions for Pranav before we move on to Tori?
Pranav, hey, congratulations, by the way. Great job, and good luck with the pro career. And I know that if that doesn't pan out, it looks like you're going to be very successful. But I had a question. Of course, my experience has been, with the women for 29 years in college, right? So tell us a little bit about, how your experience for the team academically was. I mean, did you guys, have study hall hours? How was it in 2 different institutions? Where was academics in both those teams?
Very different. That's a great question. Definitely A&M was more of they're very focused on their sports. Obviously it's a very big school, very known for their sports. So we had a lot of international guys too, more than SMU. So the focus, not that academics was sort of not a focus, but the focus was definitely on the tennis. But for me, I was like kind of me and maybe like 2 or 3 of my teammates were a little different, where we would focus quite evenly on school and tennis. Like my undergrad was not very easy. It was very, very difficult. I did computer science, so doing that on top of the tennis was challenging. A lot of late nights, a lot of sacrifice for sure. But then when you go to SMU, then the culture was a little different. It was more academic focused. Not a lot of teammates of mine had pro aspirations. And even when I was going through those processes, I never really had pro aspirations until my very last year at SMU. But I definitely felt the vibe of SMU and A&M was very different. Obviously, they were both still very, very good schools, but certain my a lot of my teammates kind of put a lot of focus on their tennis at A&M, whereas at SMU, a lot of my teammates put a lot more focus on academics.
Pranav, did you get your undergrad in 3 years at A&M or
I did in 4, so
four?
I redshirted my very first year at A&M, and then I got a COVID year too, so I ended up getting 2 extra years, and I used those at SMU.
Got it. Great question, Sujay.
Hey Rex, if I can add, one of the things about college tennis is that we coaches, we have access to our academic advisor who guides our student athletes, and so every 2 to 4 weeks, we are getting their grades and how they are doing in each of those classes, and so that's a real good tool for us because we know now, hey, who needs a little extra help, who needs a tutor or who needs to maybe back up from tennis a little bit. And so for me, that's a really, really valuable tool. And I think a lot of college coaches use that, to help them mentor and guide their student athletes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sujay. That's great info for the parents and the juniors out there. And sounds like real similar to what we have at SMU. As Pranav mentioned, academics is taken very seriously at at our school, Southern Methodist University. So, any other questions for Pranav? Oh,
I actually have one. Hi, this is Tal. Pranav, so like in the recruiting process, as you are getting recruited, to be on the team, are there specific major that they ask that if you're a specific major, do you get where they say hey, you commit a certain hours? If let's say you're a medical student, let's say you want to major in pre-med or something like that, is that does that go against you in getting recruited or things like that?
That's a great question. I think for me, for example, doing computer science, obviously kind of a challenging major. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like a negative connotation for that with college coaches necessarily. But a lot of it depends on the type of university. So I think if you're going to, like, for example, a Texas A&M where we were always, top 10 in the country, those things are viewed a little differently than maybe an SMU who's, been around the top 40. Because I think it just depends more on the university and the coaches. So like those big time programs, obviously they want your, major commitment to be on the tennis, for sure. Because they want a lot of the coaches bonus things like that are attached to how you do in conference play or how you do in NCAAs. And but they also, one thing that they do have, they also have a lot of coaches have bonuses for team GPA and having the highest team GPA. Like I know at SMU we got the highest team GPA the last 2 years, I believe, for our men's team. And I think the coaches are very encouraging of those things now. I think they're sometimes part of their contracts. But to answer your question about like medical students and computer science students and things like that, I feel like those things are viewed in a very positive way for most schools because they obviously coaches want players that are willing to work hard and are willing to put themselves out there in tough, challenging positions. So I think if you have a kid that's coming in that says, I want to be a doctor one day, I've seen a lot of my friends that have had those aspirations, whether it was in high school or college, that have had great experiences in college with their coaches and with their programs.
great question, Tal.
Thank you. That's really good to know. Yeah.
Of course.
Any other questions from anybody else before we move on? Nope. All right. last but not least, Tori. All right, so Tori had a different experience as a student athlete. So, even though she was a good player coming out of the state of Florida, so arguably, better quality junior tennis than even here in the Texas section, she actually chose to go the club tennis route. So, as some of you out there may know, USTA offers a college intramural program called Tennis on Campus, and so Tori was our team captain for a little while, so very active in that. Kept her rigorous academic schedule in a sorority. Did many other things, but yes, tennis was still a very big part of her experience in college, and she will be graduating this fall, right? Awesome. All right, Tori. So yeah, as a student athlete, how did you decide, going the club tennis, the tennis on campus route, despite having, the type of junior playing background that you could have looked at, D3, D1, any number of schools, any number of opportunities?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this today. So yeah, I had kind of a unique experience. So I graduated in 2020. So that was in the height of COVID. I think that definitely affected my decision of where I was gonna go to college and if I wanted to play tennis or not. I played junior tennis competitively growing up since I was a kid. And had a really great experience, seriously played every day, practicing every afternoon. And then I actually suffered a back injury in high school. And so that kind of altered my thoughts of exactly where I would go with my tennis career after that. Before that, I was looking at a lot of D1 or D2 and D3 schools, visiting a lot of D2 and D3 schools. And then I was offered a spot to play at a small Division I school in Florida, and actually decided to turn it down and decided to go to SMU instead. And then tennis on campus, basically I needed friends in the beginning, and that's kind of why I joined. And tennis was still a passion of mine, and I still wanted to be involved on the court and things like that. So that's actually how I made a lot of my friends originally, and my freshman year was a great year to kind of get started. And I think something that's really important about my experience is we talk a lot about balancing academics and tennis and like your degree and your grades. But I think something else that's really important that I've learned through internships and shadowing experiences and jobs and things like that is there's also a lot of life experience to learn before you go out into the real world and before you get a job and all these things. And I think you really learn that on the tennis court. So whether you're playing varsity and you have like your varsity team at D1, D2, D3 level, or if you're playing tennis on campus, you're playing at a club level, I think there's a lot of like social skills, leadership skills that you can learn from that experience. So I actually was the president of the club for 3 years, which was really awesome. And the position kind of just fell into my lap sophomore year, which was pretty unique. But our president actually stepped down because she didn't feel like she could hold the position. And so it was a really big learning curve because we had an entirely new executive board. And so I learned a lot that year about kind of communication and how to run the club. We were lucky enough to have Grant as our advisor, so that was really awesome. And our SMU advisors in like the club sports department was really great too. But I think, yeah, so I learned a lot about leadership, which has directly kind of gone into my post-grad situation. I want to go to occupational therapy school, so I'll actually be getting my doctorate in occupational therapy next year. I'll be starting a 3-year program. And throughout all my interviews, they ask me a lot about leadership positions and communication and things like that. And that's something that I learned through tennis on campus. I also learned that in other positions as well, like in my sorority, which I was really lucky to be a part of too, and things like that. But yeah, so kind of a crazy way of getting there, but I'm really happy with my decision to do club tennis because I feel like I was also able to do a lot of things that I missed out on growing up because I was always on the tennis court. And so I sacrificed a lot of time with friends and family and a lot of what most people would think would be like essential parts of growing up. And so I was able to kind of experience that in college, which was great. And then also learned a lot of leadership and communication skills through that as well.
So for those of you out there that don't know, tennis on campus, as we mentioned, is the the club intramural sport, you know, at a lot of colleges and universities around the country, certainly around the state of Texas. But you know, unlike Pranav, you know, his student athlete experience, you know, he was limited to 8 and 20 hours a week, depending on whether you know, the college team was in season or not. So Tori's experience, you know, being in tennis on campus, they still practiced as a team, they still traveled and competed as a team, but not necessarily the same obligations that a student athlete might have. So, you know, they still get to play the sport that they enjoy. Obviously, we've heard about you know, Tori's academic experience and how she's going to, you know, take that going forward. And so, you know, again, you know, whether somebody goes, you know, the route that PK did, or whether they go the route that Tori has, you know, it's still a wonderful experience to, you know, to be able to play this sport, you know, going forward as college aged you know, student athletes. And then, yeah, I want to go back to Tori for one more question. You know, from your parents' perspective, you know, how supportive were they at some of the various milestone ages? You know, so, you know, 10 and under, you know, maybe when you became a teenager, once you got old enough to drive, once you became an adult, you know, did their support of you playing tennis, you know, continue to be the same, or did it wane for, you know, some of the reasons we've talked about? You know, Justin obviously has worked with a lot of high school players, and so I just wanted to hear how your parents handled your tennis playing growing up.
Yeah. So I actually was really lucky. My parents were very supportive of my tennis career. And actually tennis and academics were on a pretty even level growing up. So school and tennis were just as important as each other, which I think was really good for me because I was able to really place an importance on both. And then throughout those various milestones, they were supportive about the whole thing. They actually wanted me to play varsity tennis in college. And so they were kind of disappointed with my decision to not do that. But they were happy that I was able to be on the club and be president of that. And then I also teach tennis for SMU's junior program, and I've done that for the past 4 years. So I've still been really involved in tennis. But yeah, they were very supportive of my journey and continue to support my journey. And my mom just called me yesterday and was like, you need to join a league. So I've been really lucky that my parents have been supportive and have really wanted me to continue playing tennis, and were like that when I was growing up as well.
Just as a follow-up to that, out of curiosity, you know, so this, you know, this is a little bit out of the ordinary. Why, you know, why were your parents more supportive of you playing, you know, college tennis, varsity tennis versus not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it was because they thought that I had a lot of natural talent on the tennis court. And so they kind of thought that by me choosing not to go that route, I was almost kind of wasting that talent when I could still, I had that opportunity to pursue that. But I think there was also kind of an understanding between us, just because after I suffered my back injury, my perspective of tennis kind of changed, and I really struggled to get back to the place where I was before I was injured, because I had to take a 1.5 years off, which is a long time to kind of step off of the court. And so, yeah, they wanted me to continue playing varsity tennis. They were definitely disappointed and still bring it up. But they are supportive of me playing club. And I think they also, just kind of like everyone else is saying, they know that you learn a lot from that experience. There's lots of discipline, and you learn a lot about, you know, being on a team and things like that. And there's lots of essential parts of life that you can learn from that experience. And so I think they were kind of sad that I was going to miss out on that. But I think they were also pleasantly surprised when I had that experience with the club as well. We traveled to, you know, we went to Florida and played nationals there 1 year, and that was really fun. And, you know, we practiced 3 to 4 times a week. And so I still had that tennis experience in college, just at a much less, like way less intensity. So.
That's great, Tori. Thanks for sharing your experiences about that. Any questions from the panel before we move on to the group questions for everybody? Nope. All right. I know we have, how much time do we have left, Ben?
I had it initially set for 7:45, but if y'all are ready to wrap, we can.
Do we have time to ask maybe 3 or 4 questions?
To the group? Yeah, sure thing.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. spends with the staff at USTA Texas. So yeah, he and his coworker Kyle were nice enough to organize this for all of us, and so hopefully everybody else out there will be able to enjoy it. But yeah, let's go ahead and ask a few questions of the group. Thank you, Erica, for these questions. But yeah, this is for everybody. So other than the emphasis on academics, what other experiences have you had? Maybe some of the pros and cons, or some of the positives, or some of the opportunities that you've had, that you believe are part of your journey, that may differ from other non-AAPI individuals out there that are playing tennis right now. Feel free to hop in.
I can answer that if you want. Okay. Yeah, I think just being like part of this community, obviously you have to, like we talked about, academics are super important, but that's not necessarily a negative thing. I think that's a very positive thing that that you have something that you can not necessarily fall back on, but something you can rely on. Especially like if your whole life, for example, is tennis, and you go, there've been times for me where there's 3-4 months where I feel like I can't put a ball in the court. Then if your whole life is if your identity is just tennis, then I feel like you can spiral down very quickly. Whereas, if you're doing school, and if you have, other activities going on, that are also important to you, I think it just diversifies you as well, and it just balances, all the challenges that are associated with growing up, or anything in your life. I feel like it just helps with balance.
Yeah, I would just, I'll say something to that too, Pranav. I think that's a great point. You just talk about goal setting and having goals. I just think about a young girl, Asian American girl, Chelsea Sun. She just committed to West Point. She's going to go play at West Point. Actually, she's in her freshman year, and played high school for all 4 years. And that was her goal from day one. And then, as to Tori, speak to Tori, I've had a lot of players go and play club. They traveled, they had uniforms, and they had a great experience. And they'll come back and they'll say, Coach, I'm on a team, and I met so-and-so from Lake Travis, or, some of these other places that they've competed to. So, just to speak to Pranav's point and Tori's point, it's just such a great sport, and there's so many opportunities. And even Sujay saying, and I'll have conversations with players all the time, you can play somewhere. And I highly suggest to all my players, if you want and can play college tennis, which a lot of my players can, then they should go experience it. And there's places to play, as Sujay mentioned. So, yeah, I've seen it from club tennis to, to somebody as academically minded as West Point and playing tennis. So, it's out there, to diversify and be a well-rounded individual if you can commit to it. So,
yeah, Rex, also wanted to add that, like Texas has a really good high school tennis, and I know that, a lot of the top players still play high school tennis, and that's a real plus, because for me, a lot of these kids that come to college tennis, they haven't played team tennis. And so a lot of times when they come to play college tennis, they don't know what it's like to be in a team. So I just recently, got a commit from Meghna Kumar, who plays five. I think you probably know Meghna. Yeah, she's coming to us next year. And really, one of the reasons was, like, I'd seen her, and I lived in Argyle, and so I always heard about the kind of team player she was, and how selfless she was, and when I went and observed her around her team and her teammates, although she was so much better than her teammates, the way she treated the teammates, the coaches, that was a huge plus. And so she's coming to us next year. Again, another great example of where she's coming with, I believe, 50 credit hours. So she's going to be finishing her bachelor's of nursing in 2 years, and then she's going to do a master's. So she's going to do, she's going to be done with master's in 4 years. So she'll get 4 years of tennis, but at the same time, she's going to get her bachelor's and master's. The last thing I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, it seems like, of course, Pranav and Tori, looks like you guys had great parents. They kind of guided you and kind of gave you a lot of leeway to make your decisions and kind of choose your path. And having been in Texas, Texas junior tennis is it's not easy, man. From like 10 and under to 12 and under to those ZAD days and champ, super champ. I mean, it's intense. There's a lot of really good players. There's a lot of pressure out there, and so I got to really see junior tennis from a different light, not just as a coach but also as a parent. And I think unfortunately, what I did see also is there are a lot of Asian parents that don't really know anything about tennis, and also their kids are pretty talented, they get going, and so they start kind of trying to like push their agenda to try to be their coach, to try to expedite their process of becoming a very good player. And then so for so many great successful players, I saw also a lot of kids that really were hurt by parents who did not know how tough of a journey tennis is and how difficult of a sport. And so I would love for parents, to really educate themselves and also to really, find good coaches and mentors and trust them and be parents, and be supportive, and understand that, if you get too involved, and especially with little knowledge, it could be very harmful and hurtful for their development. And ultimately, I mean, I'm sure Pranav and Tori, you probably have also seen some kids that quit. They didn't even finish high school tennis or junior tennis. Or I'm sure, Justin, you probably saw some parents putting so much, expectations and pressures, right? And that kids started, succumbing to the pressure and eventually hating the game, which is kind of sad. So just my 2 cents on that.
Really quickly, I just want to actually say something about that. I agree. I think it's really important that parents should get educated on the game, but I think also having a relationship with the coach is really important. And I kind of experienced this firsthand with my parents as well. Kind of around like age 14, my dad and I were really butting heads a lot after tournaments and things like that. And I think he was really supportive of my journey, but personally, he didn't really understand the game. And so we would fight a lot about it, and it kind of made tournaments dreadful almost for a little bit. Like, we had a short period of time where that was really hard for me as a player. And I think us sitting down with my coach and kind of talking about it, and him kind of creating that trust and relationship with her was really helpful for me. And so I think that I completely agree. I think that's really important for parents to get educated and trust coaches, and to really just be supportive parents and to help their kids with their tennis journey rather than just always expect the most out of them. Like, sometimes they have a bad day and that's just how it is. And sometimes you make mistakes on the court and that's just how it is. And so, yeah, I completely agree.
There's also, for me, there's another point too. Like, even if, for example, you don't see tennis going past, say, high school, that's perfectly fine. And honestly, later in life too, like, tennis is kind of like golf. Like, there's so many like business deals or so many events that are involved with tennis that can, potentially help your career later on in life. So I think just tennis as a sport, I think, is very, obviously it's a worldwide sport. Probably like, I think I was reading the other day, it's definitely a top 5 global sport in the world, like most people play. So even if you don't see yourself playing college tennis, which obviously it's not for everybody, it definitely helps you later on in life. And it's also a game you can play, when you're 60 years old and you just want to go outside and enjoy the weather. There's just so many benefits to tennis that in the short term may not seem like it, but definitely in the long term, there's so many benefits.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off of what all 4 of our panelists have have said. I mean, this is a great opportunity for everybody, and then even for those other college coaches that might be listening in tonight, or high school coaches, or even teaching pros. Don't be afraid to to help paint a certain picture for both the players and the parents, just as we've done tonight. So I mean, that's part of our responsibility to continue growing this game, right? Is to help everybody understand how much the sport can give to so many people. And again, if we just want to completely keep it on the business end of things, as all four of the panelists have mentioned, I mean, this is an opportunity to the sport is a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of people. I mean, my gosh, I mean, all four panelists who were nice enough to give their time tonight. I mean, I know them through different aspects of the sport, whether it's through business or fellow coaches, teaching pros. Tori and Pranav both go to school where I work, and so yeah, I mean, you get to meet a lot of wonderful people that are happy to to give some of their time, and we can all grow this thing together. So I guess before we conclude, are there any other questions out there? I know Ben may be cutting us off soon.
I actually have one more, Rex, and this is actually kind of for Tori. When you spoke about the decision that you made in terms of, turning down playing in college versus playing club, or tennis on campus, right? I'd like to have your insight on this, and I think it's really important for the youth here to kind of hear this insight, because, all these juniors out here that are working every day, they have an ultimate goal, right? A lot of them ultimately to play in college. Some of these kids who are homeschooling and who's going to tennis academy, and the ultimate goal for them is maybe not turn pro, maybe turn pro, or maybe play D1 college, maybe play D2, D3, whatever their ultimate goal is. But when you made the decision to not play college, do you have any regrets in the hours that you put into training, as a junior, all the effort that you put into committing to play tennis, to eventually play college? I'm sure that was your ultimate goal, right? And that when the time came and that you decided not to play college and to rather play club tennis, were there any regrets? What ultimately lead you to that decision and things like that? I think it's important for the juniors that are here today to understand and hear that, because ultimately they're going to make that decision as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely sometimes have regrets. So, like I said, I work for SMU's junior program, and sometimes I go to the men's and women's matches, and watching those, sometimes I miss it. And it's not really as much about because of all the time I put into it, but it's more just missing that level of competition and things like that. And also being part of a team. I had a really great high school experience with my high school team. And so it's really fun to watch that, but sometimes I do have that regret. But generally, I don't think that I do, because at this point, the stage of life that I'm in and what I want to do with the rest of my life, I think I learned a lot from my experience, just as I was talking about leadership and communication and things like that. I think that'll help me in my future profession. I think that'll really help me in my doctorate program next year. And so it's not like making the decision to not play college tennis does not make you a failure or make it the wrong decision. And I think there's an avenue for everybody, and you can still be really involved in tennis, and that time is not a waste, because ultimately, like everybody else has said, you learn a lot from playing college tennis, but you also learn a lot from playing juniors. Like, you make a lot of sacrifices, you might miss a lot of things, but you learn how to work really hard. You learn how to work with time management. You're going to practice for 4 hours after school, and then you have to go home and do your homework. And so I think ultimately you learn a lot of those lessons. So sometimes I miss that level of competition, but I think generally for the point of life that I'm in right now, I'm really happy with my choice and don't have too many regrets.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think it's really important to hear that from someone who's gone through that journey, and I think a lot of junior needs to kind of understand that, I mean, because again, they're going through this journey right now, and they experience what they know currently, but sometimes it's harder to kind of foresee the future of what they want, and to hear that, that's really refreshing. So thank you for that.
And also, I forgot to say too, all of those things that I kind of was talking about missing experiencing, I was able to experience that to a smaller extent on the club. And so we do have team practices, and we do have like team captains and things like that. And so there still is like team camaraderie, and that's really great. And there still is competition. Actually, the level of competition in club tennis is really high. If you go to like the national competition, it is a very high level of tennis, and it's very impressive. And so there is a place for everybody, and playing club tennis can be the right decision for you, and you'll still be able to be competitive. It just won't be that same everyday grind that you experienced in juniors.
Tori, I can attest to
Thank
the
you.
level of competition, because one of the girls that just graduated from Arkansas State is now at University of Michigan doing her master's degree. And so she's now at the club tennis team at Michigan, and she's like, Coach, this is some serious tennis here. The level is really high. So yeah, there's some really good tennis for club tennis too.
Yeah, I know, for a lot of the nationally ranked teams, like what Tori was talking about, I mean, it's not uncommon to see UTRs, 8 and above. Actually, one of Tori's former teammates became a teammate of Pranav's on the back end. Did you and Liam Sunkel overlap or no? I can't remember.
We did not. But yeah, he went from the club team to the SMU team. Yeah, he definitely did that. So, and earned it. So
Yeah, and 11 plus UTR, right? I think.
for who, Sunkel?
Yeah.
I never looked at UTR.
Okay.
I also don't know.
Yeah, I don't look at that stuff.
But yeah, suffice
much.
it to say that, if you just went on ball striking ability alone, I mean, he has a very high UTR. I mean, obviously, as Pranav said, he's currently on the roster at SMU, and so and if that's the quality of club tennis that's available at some places, yeah. So even the on-court piece of the sport, isn't going to be lacking at the club level, at the tennis on campus level. But any other final words from the panel before we wrap it up, or before we get cut off time-wise? No? Well, okay. Well, I'd like to thank Justin and Sujay and Pranav and Tori for their time tonight. Very valuable input from a high school coaches, a college coaches, a parents, a varsity student athlete, and a tennis on campus club athlete's perspective. So multiple perspectives about continuing to play this sport, from juniors on up to being postgraduate aged players. So hopefully you guys enjoy this, and I want to thank everybody again. Thanks to the staff for taking the time to put this together for us. Thanks for everybody on the committee for the great questions you guys provided for us, and you guys have a good night.